Ray Mercer looked like he was burying a farm. In September of 1982, while the grain trucks in Red Willow County were lined up at the elevator, Ray was dragging a rented grass drill across 360 acres of corn ground. Not pasture, not scrubland, corn ground. The kind of ground his neighbors believed had only one respectable job: take seed in spring, carry rows through summer, and send yellow grain to town before the frost came down. Ray had a canvas sack of native seed tied in the bed of his pickup: switchgrass, big blue stem, western wheatgrass, blue grama, seed so light the wind could steal it before it ever found the dirt. A combine came up the county road just after 4 in the afternoon. Ray heard the engine before he saw the machine, that deep harvest rumble every farm kid in that part of Nebraska knew by heart. The combine slowed at his fence. Ray did not wave. He did not stop the tractor. He kept his eyes on the drill, watching the tiny seed disappear into a field that, to everyone else, had just become useless for 2 years. By supper, half the township had heard. Ray Mercer had sold his corn head. Ray Mercer was planting grass. Ray Mercer, people said, had quit farming. Not what Ray thought he was doing. He was not quitting the farm. He was quitting the invoice. Ray had bought the place in 1976, when a man could still believe that more acres and more bushels would solve almost anything. The land note looked heavy but manageable. The operating line looked normal. Corn looked like the smart crop, because corn gave a farmer something visible to point at: rows, tonnage, tickets, bins. Then the math changed slowly enough that most people did not feel the trap closing until it was already around their ribs. Fuel went up. Fertilizer went up. Repairs went up. Zer went up. Repairs went up. Pumping water out of the Ogallala got more expensive every season, because the lift from the well kept getting longer. Dryland acres were exposed to the sky. Irrigated acres were exposed to diesel, parts, and interest. And every March, before a single seed had earned a penny, Ray had to borrow the full cost of trying again. By the winter of 1982, his land note had been rewritten twice. The last renewal sat at 15.75%. Ray did not tell people that number. He wrote it on the back of a seed catalog in the machine shed, with a pencil sharpened by his pocket knife and a space heater blowing at his boots. Corn inputs on his ground were running about $146 an acre when he counted seed, fertilizer, herbicide, fuel, irrigation, repairs, and the interest on the operating money. On good ground, in a good year, that still sounded survivable. But Ray stopped writing gross numbers and started writing what stayed. After the crop was sold, after the operating note was serviced, after the shortfalls from the bad corners and the late rains and the expensive pump repair had been carried forward, the farm was clearing roughly $14 an acre. 360 acres. $5,040 before the land payment. The land payment. The land payment due that year was $10,860. Ray stared at the 2 numbers until the space heater clicked off. The farm was working. The operator was working. The soil was working. But the invoice was winning. That was the line Ray could not get out of his head. Not crop against crop. Not farmer against weather. Invoice against root. Every spring the invoice came first. It came before the seed, before the rain, before the crop, before the chance to be right. A row crop farm had to buy the year before it could live through it. Native grass did not. That was the first idea that sounded foolish enough to be true. Had been reading range bulletins from the extension office and talking to an old cowman near McCook who had seeded worn-out wheat ground back to warm-season grass in the 70s. The man did not talk like he had discovered a miracle. He talked like he had removed a leak from a bucket. Establishment was expensive. Ray knew that. Seed, drill rental, soil prep, fence, water. 2 thin years before the stand could carry cattle properly. But after that, the cost structure changed. There was no annual seed bill, no annual herbicide package if the stand thickened right. No heavy fertilizer program because the cows returned a portion of what the grass grew. Less fuel, fewer field passes. Less machinery sitting in the shed waiting to break at the worst possible time. Ray put the grass and cattle operating cost at $27 an acre once established. He did not pretend the revenue would be spectacular. That was not the point. At 1 cow-calf pair per 10 acres, 360 acres could carry 36 pairs when the grass came in. At the calf prices he was using, the gross would not embarrass a row crop operation, but it would not impress one either. The difference was what the money had to fight through before it reached the kitchen table. Same land, smaller check, fewer teeth taking bites out of it. And by year 4, if the stand thickened under rotation, if the roots settled deep enough, if the water points let him move pressure instead of punishing one corner, the stocking rate could improve. Not by magic, by density, by rest, by grass plants getting stronger instead of being asked to behave like an annual crop. Ray wrote one sentence on the catalog. The crop is not the income. The system is. Then he underlined system until the pencil lead broke. The county saw only the first half of the decision. They saw him sell the corn head in August. They saw the cultivator leave on a flatbed behind a neighbor's truck. They saw him borrow a grass drill in September and pull it over ground that had paid taxes with corn for years. They saw no crop standing behind him. They saw no crop ahead of him. A farmer with no visible crop is an easy man to misunderstand. Nolan Price, who farmed the section east of Ray, said at the elevator that Ray had planted a government ditch in the middle of good dirt. Another man said Ray would be back in corn as soon as the bank made him sober. Ray heard both remarks before Thanksgiving. He answered neither. There was no argument Ray could win that year because the proof had not grown yet. The first spring looked bad enough to make the mockery feel reasonable. The switchgrass came up in scattered green hairs. The big blue stem was late. The blue grama looked like something the wind had accidentally dropped. On the south rise, the stand was so thin that from the road it looked like Ray had simply forgotten to farm it. His wife, Marion, asked once whether he had expected it to look that poor. Ray said, yes. yes to look that poor? Ray said yes. Then he went back to the shed and read the bulletin again, because he needed to see the sentence in print. Native grass establishes slowly above ground while building below. He had already cut the operating line because he was not buying a full corn package. That helped, but it did not make the house feel rich. The farm had less cash moving through it, and less cash moving through a farm can look like failure, even when less debt is the point. In 1983, he bought 28 cow-calf pairs from a dispersal sale. Older cows, mostly, not the pretty kind that bring a crowd. He stalked lightly, because the grass was not ready to be pushed. He broke the farm into temporary paddocks with electric wire and moved the herd every 9 or 10 days. He hauled portable tanks. He fixed fence in heat that made the wire hum in his hands. That first calf crop did not silence anyone. 24 calves weaned. Average weight, 420 pounds. It paid money, but not enough to look like victory from the road. Nolan Price ran the math in his head and decided the grass was proving exactly what he had said it would prove. A field that could have grown corn was now carrying a few cows. But Nolan was counting the wrong thing. He counted the calves. Ray counted the note that did not have to be renewed. The darkest summer came the next year. June went dry. By July, the county ditches were pale and dusty, and the crop men were watching clouds the way a sick man watches a doctor's face. Corn leaves curled in the afternoons. Irrigation motors ran hard. Fuel bills ran harder. Ray's grass did not look lush. It looked rough. The ridge still had open spots. The cattle were moved early off one paddock because he did not like how tight they had grazed it. He sold 3 poor cows instead of buying more. At night, Marion could hear him at the kitchen table, moving numbers around with the same pencil pressure he used in the shed. The bank asked whether he wanted to put the North 80 back into corn for 1 season. Just 1 season. Just to show revenue. That was the most dangerous phrase in farming. Just 1 season. Ray almost said yes, not because the plan had failed, but because the plan looked lonely in the middle. Corn would have given him something familiar to do, something the neighbors recognized as work, something a banker could enter into a line on a form without pausing. But the North 80 was where the western wheatgrass had finally taken hold. It was not pretty. It was root. Ray left it alone. By the fall of 1985, the argument began to change shape. Not loudly, not all at once. First, it changed under the grass. The bare patches shrank. The ridge thickened. The blue stem that had looked almost absent in year 2 started throwing taller stems after rest. Ray added a second permanent water point, which let him stop overusing the easiest paddock near the lane. The cattle spread better. The grass recovered better. The farm began acting less like one field and more like a machine with living parts. That year he ran 39 pairs. The calf check was not spectacular, but there was no seed bill waiting behind it, no nitrogen bill, no emergency repair on a planter, no spring operating note large enough to make a rain cloud feel like a creditor. Ray's gross was smaller than the old corn years people like to remember. Retained money was larger than the old corn years actually left him. That difference is hard to gossip about because it does not make a dramatic picture. No full-grain trucks, no golden pile at the elevator, no harvest lights running until midnight. Just a smaller stack of checks going out. Just a family sleeping through March without signing away the whole year before the first warm rain. In 1987, Nolan stopped at the fence. He did not get out at first. He sat in his pickup and watched Ray move cattle from one paddock into the next. The cows knew the sound of the gate chain, came without being pushed, calves slipping through the opening in a loose black line. The field behind them was not eaten down to dirt. That was what Nolan noticed. It still had height. He had expected pasture to mean a field getting weaker every year until it turned gray and sour. Ray's grass was doing the opposite. It was filling in. Nolan finally stepped out and asked what Ray was fertilizing with. Ray looked at the cattle, then the ground. "Time," he said. That was not the whole answer, but it was the part Nolan had not priced. Time was the input Ray had been trying to buy back. By 1989, Ray's bank file looked different. The operating line was smaller. The interest he paid every year was smaller. The land payment was still real, still heavy, but it no longer sat on top of a giant seasonal bet. The appraiser who came out that spring expected to see abandoned crop ground and found a managed grazing unit with cross fence, reliable water, and a stand dense enough to carry more cattle than the first plan had promised. He valued the place higher than Ray expected, not because grass was glamorous, because the farm had stopped depending on one expensive annual attempt. That was the part the township had missed when they said Ray had quit. Rows are easy to see. Risk is not. Debt renewal is not. A root system is not. Debt renewal is not. A root system is not. For years, Ray's neighbors had judged the farm by what rose above the ground in summer. Corn height, ear count, truckloads, yield talk at the elevator. Ray had learned to judge it by what did not have to be purchased again. The fence did not need to be bought every March. The water line did not need to be financed every spring. The grass seed, once established, did not send him a bill. The cows did not make the farm rich in a single season, but they made it harder for a single season to ruin him. By 1992, Ray was running 58 cow-calf pairs on the same 360 acres. He had not found a secret price, beaten the weather. He had not become smarter than every farmer around him. He had simply stopped building his life around a crop that required him to buy a new chance every year. The land note that once looked bigger than the farm's margin was paid down ahead of schedule. Not with one dramatic windfall. With calves, lower interest, fewer input shocks, and a field that kept working after the equipment was parked. Nolan Price eventually ceded 40 acres of his own low ground to native grass. He never said Ray had been right. Farmers do not always use those words. He only asked Ray where he had bought the seed. That was enough. Years later, people driving past the Mercer place did not see the old argument. They saw cattle spread across warm season grass, stock tanks catching the late light, fence lines running clean, and a field that looked as if it had always belonged that way. They did not see the winter catalog. They did not see the 2 columns of numbers. They did not see the afternoon when a man almost put 80 acres back into corn because loneliness sounded like prudence. But the farm remembered. The ground that had once demanded a full invoice before it could grow anything now carried life on roots Ray had planted when everyone else thought he was burying his future. Ray Mercer did not stop farming. He stopped farming the invoice. And once the invoices stopped growing, the roots did not.